Hello, friends. Welcome back to the course on carbon footprint, carbon budget, and climate justice. In this lecture, we would discuss how the United States of America is consuming its carbon budget. Or, in other words, we would be looking into the emissions, the CO2 emissions from the most polluting country of the world, United States of America. The carbon budget we said is exhausted a lot of the 2,250 gigatons of CO2 budget. We are all but left with only 400 gigatons of CO2 equivalent, and this is in 2020 data. Okay, so it means that from 2020 onwards, the carbon budget is 400 gigatons per CO2, and who has consumed this budget is an interesting question. Okay, because if you want to stay within the temperature level of 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial level, then the countries which are emitting more, they should stop emitting immediately. Uh, we had talked about the carbon space per capita, and we had highlighted that United States, Australia, Canada, Russia, Japan, and South Africa, they are consuming the carbon space. They are the top level. They are the top countries which consume the carbon space on a per capita basis, right? So the objective is to understand how this consumption happens, in which sectors this consumption happens, and then finally what could be done so that the carbon budget is judiciously used. So we had said that the emissions, the carbon dioxide emissions in total from United States of America is 6 gigatons. 6 gigatons is also 6 billion tons, or 6 billion tons is also 6,000 million tons. Okay, so you should be comfortable with the units. Okay, so 6,000 million tons is 6 billion tons of CO2 equivalent, right? And we said that the world budget is now only 400 gigatons if the target temperature is 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial level. We also gave a hint saying that if uh, all other countries stop emitting and only the United States of America is allowed to emit, then also the entire carbon budget would be consumed within 66 years. And how did we calculate that? So in the last video, we said that this can be calculated as the remaining budget, which is 400 gigatons upon 6 gigatons, right, per year. So this gives us 66 or 67 years of the span for the total carbon budget to be utilized by America alone. Now, how is this carbon emissions happening in the United States of America? So we can look at the data from two perspectives. One is what gases are being emitted, and second is and how much they contribute to the carbon budget of America or carbon footprint of America. And the second is sectorally, which sectors are consuming more and contributing to the occupancy of carbon space. So, from the sectoral perspective, if you look at it, you will find that the largest contributor to the carbon emissions in United States of America is the transportation sector. It takes about 30% of the carbon budget. Following that is electricity generation, which is consuming 25% of the total, and industry is closer, which is consuming 23%. The remaining carbon budget is utilized by the residential consumers and commercial consumers, and the 10% of it is consumed by agricultural sector. Agricultural sector, the emissions are methane, whereas in majority of the other cases, you would find carbon dioxide is the emission. So electricity generation would consume the carbon dioxide budget. Transportation would also lead to CO2 emissions and nitrous oxide emissions, and residential and commercial sectors would also contribute to CO2 emissions, right? Uh, the other gases are chlorofluorocarbons, and which are emitted from refrigeration sectors. Okay, so all in all, if you find the CO2 remains the major contributor in the emissions of the carbon from United States of America, and that comes from primarily from electricity generation and transportation sector and industry. So if we switch to renewables, if we switch to clean transport mechanisms, and if you switch to cleaner modes of fuel consumption in industry, one can reduce the carbon footprint of United States of America. That is what it gives us the insight about. So the same data I had also shown it in the form of pie diagram. You look at it, you will find that 79% is consumed from carbon dioxide, and methane is contributing around 10 to 11%, nitrous oxide 7%, other gases 3%. And sectorally also you see city generation is contributing 25%, transportation around 27%, industry around 24 to 25%, agriculture 10 to 11%. There's commercial sector, that is malls, etc., they contribute 7%, and residences, houses, they contribute 6%. Okay, so this is the breakup. You can also look at the data from the historical perspective, as from 1990 onwards, how the emissions have reduced, have changed. You'll see that there is a reduction. You look at the total emissions, you find that the total emissions were 6,500 million tons, and now they are reduced in 2020 to 6,000 million tons. Okay, so this is one way of looking at that. And the net emissions have reduced. Net emissions means there are carbon sinks. Okay, so carbon sinks would absorb some carbon dioxide. That is as a result of which the net emissions would be reduced from, and that has come down significantly because of sequestration of carbon dioxide. That we'll see later, that concept. Okay, similarly, you'll find that coal continues to be the major emitter from CO2 emissions from coal. They contribute a lot to the carbon footprint, and the carbon dioxide emissions from coal is around 5,000 million tons. Okay, whereas from other sources like petroleum and natural gases, they are less. So sorry, this blue one is the total. Sorry, so blue one is total is 6,000, and from that 6,000, the coal contribution is 1,000. The natural gas contribution is around 1,800, and petroleum is consuming the highest. Okay, it is consuming 2,000 plus. So 6,000 billion tons, you understand, primarily comes from petroleum, that is in transportation, followed by natural gas, and the least contributor is coal. And not coal is not the total major contributor in United States of America. Whereas in India, for example, you'll find that coal is contributing a lot in the carbon dioxide emissions. So depending upon the fossil fuel availability of different nations, you will find that the contribution of the different sources to the carbon footprint would change. Now here, sector-wise, as we had discussed, electric power, then transportation, industrial, commercial, and residential. So you can pause this video and then look for yourself as to what sector is contributing how much. Okay, so you see that now the highest contributor is from transportation. Okay, in 2020, followed by that is electric power, followed by that is industrial, and then commercial and residential. So this way you can look at the data and interpret the data. Okay, and finally, there is one more. This is again in terms of the fossil fuel used, and you'll find that coal, natural gas, petroleum, then there is non-biomass waste, and the total. Okay, so this way, if you look at the data, you can see that carbon footprint of United States of America is reducing. Historically, it has been higher. The forecast is it would reduce, and why it would reduce, that we'll see in the next class. But if this developed countries like Australia, United States of America, Canada, the European Union, if they focus on reducing the carbon footprint, then and then you would find that the carbon space would be then available for the other developing countries and underdeveloping countries like African countries, and then they would prosper. Otherwise, if the entire carbon budget is eaten up by the developed world, then there is a very remote chance of the developing and the underdeveloped countries to grow, to industrialize. Okay, and they would be then left into the trap of poverty. Okay, so this is one way of looking at the data. You can go and look and download the data for different countries and see as to what sectors contribute to the CO2 emissions and other gas emissions, and that data would then be useful for discussing the policy questions. I hope that this data has given you important insights on the carbon footprint and carbon budget issues. Thank you very much. Bye for now.